You guys know I'm going to say it. You know I'm going to say, how are you doing? How are you doing? So weak. How are you doing? This is Sunday. 3 days of enlightenment, of friendship, of knowledge. 2022 Conscious Life Expo. I've had the most amazing time. Have you guys had the most amazing time? Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. Now we can move on. Whitley Strieber. Whitley Strieber. Here's the deal. We all have the same story, and this is the story. I thought that I was the only one. I thought I was the only one that read Communion in 1988, 89. I'm in Pasadena. I've got my secret book, and I had heard about it, and it's in my room, and it's looking at me, and I'm coming in, and I'm reading it, and I'm not really talking to my friends about it. It's my own little thing. I thought I was the only one with that story. Everybody in this room has got that story. And it goes beyond that. And rereading it and the cover and the connection. But what that book did is it helped us all in this journey of ours where we go and we take things on and we expand our lives and we go and learn. So I thought I was the only one that had the communion motivation. I have done 2,000 interviews. We all know this. I've done 2,000 interviews. And through those interviews over the years, I have heard from some of the most important researchers and directors and contactees over and over again with the same story. Well, man, I read Communion and I started my life's journey into this investigation. I'm hearing it over and over. I thought I was the only guy. I thought I was the only person with this experience. What Whitley has meant to myself personally in this community, the amount of emotional connection and that hero's journey that we have gone on, the amount of that cannot be measured. And Whitley Strieber is here with us today. That's how important he is to me. Show his appreciation right now and say, yo, Whitley, give it up. Give it up. Give it up. Now, Whitley wants to get on. He's like, Jimmy, long enough. Whitley and I just finished a movie. I just want to mention this, called The Observers. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life to do this with Whitley. When I called Whitley and I said, we're doing this picture and we would and I said, it's this, and he said, oh, it's all of our friends in this film. I said, yes, this has never been done before. I said, no, we're all going to be at the same place at the same time. We are. We're just going to sit down and talk. He said, Jimmy, I'm in. And it's just one of my, it's just, life can end today and I'm happy. What Whitley did with our friends there was one last thing and I'm going to bring him up on the stage. We videotaped 4 dinners. Whitley, was it 4 dinners? 3? 4? 3. We videotaped 3 dinners of us sitting at the table. It's William Henry, Linda Moulton Howe, Richard Dolan, myself, and Whitley, talking for 3-4 hours a night while eating, and we videotaped everything, and we're going to release that. It's better than the movie. So with that, Whitley's new book will be coming out soon. It's called Them. He'll be talking about that today. Please give a 2022 Conscious Life Expo welcome to our friend, Mr. Whitley Strieber.
Oh, good.
You're good.
I am good. All right, I'm good. Well, thank you all for turning out today. It's been a long time since any of us have done this physically. It's very nice to see actual human faces again. I'm glad we're all still here. I had my doubts at times. I think we all did. But, you know, there's a change. and it's an interesting one. That is that now, 10 years ago, this hall would have been more than full. And there was a reason for that. People were curious, but it wasn't real. Now it's getting real, and it's very challenging. And they didn't expect that. They expected it to be something that would sort of be fun, you know, maybe they'd have cooler cell phones or something. But this is a big deal. And you know it's a big deal, or you wouldn't be here. So that makes you very special. Very special people. And if you aren't on Unknown Country on our website, it's unknowncountry.com, and you will find a large group of people there who are seriously capable and interested in dealing with this material and this experience of contact, which is a very, very complex, rich, difficult, wonderful, fun, scary, dangerous, enlightening experience. And it's probably other things, too, that I haven't thought of. Anyway, it's quite something to be a part of it. When I was first engaging with the visitors, one of them called me the luckiest of the lucky. And I thought, what a jerk. What an asinine thing to say to me. But it's turned out to be quite true. It is true. We're very lucky to have noticed this. You know, Dr. Gary Nolan and Dr. Kit Green. Dr. Green is and please don't be suspicious of him. He's not one of the bad guys. He's worked in the CIA for a very long time. A lot of that time with people like us, and me, and personally, in fact. And Dr. Nolan is at Stanford University, and they've been analyzing the brains of close encounter witnesses. Why do we have these experiences? And it turns out that there is a reason for it. And it's apparently not necessarily, and I think this is going to turn out to be terribly important over time, that we've been sort of chosen at all. It's that we remember, because there's a different structure in our brains. There is an area, there are two brain areas called the caudate and the putamen. And between them, there's what's called white matter that links the two. And in those of us who have close encounter experiences, the white matter is much denser. Now, what we don't know is, did the close encounter experiences make it denser? Or were we just born like that because of just genetic selection, normal genetic selection? And because of it, we can see this, because it's also true that people with these features have psychic experiences. One of them with a particularly dense structures in her brain is provably and easily provably psychokinetic. Unfortunately, she can't move a truck, but she can certainly move other things. And in my case, my brain I had two MRI scans, one from 1988, I guess, and then one from very much more recently. And the structures were the same. So, unfortunately, since my experience was before 1988, we still don't know, and that didn't tell us anything. Before my experiences, there were very few. MRIs were very new in those days. So, unfortunately, we don't know. But I think probably everyone in this room who's had an experience or remembers an experience has a brain like that. Now, what if everybody has these experiences? Everybody. What if this isn't something new, but part of human life? And what's new is we're becoming aware of it. That is to say, the consciousness of mankind at this level is growing in response to the challenges that we are experiencing. Now, I'm working on a book called Them. And the questions are, who are they? Are they part of us? Are we part of them? What do they want with us? Why are they here? And let's also turn those questions around. Who are we? What do we want? Where do we want to go with our lives and with the life of mankind? Because there are not 10,000 people in this room. Believe me, every single person on this planet will be more profoundly affected by this than there will be by practically anything else that happens, unless perhaps we have a nuclear war or some kind of enormous environmental catastrophe. When I had the communion experience in 1985, I met a man, thank God, called Bud Hopkins. We fought later, but that's okay. He was still a good man, and he was a wonderful man. He misapprehended some things that had happened between us, and unfortunately couldn't ever be convinced that it was not my fault, which it wasn't. In any case, he introduced me to a doctor, Donald Klein, who placed me under hypnosis. He was a very skilled forensic hypnotist. He placed me under hypnosis, and my awareness of this experience began. After that, I went through a period of trying to debunk it, basically. I took psychological tests, that MRI scan I referred to, tests for temporal lobe epilepsy, and all sorts of things, in an effort to find something wrong with me, because I couldn't believe this had really happened, physically, that I had seen that. And that picture was made with me sitting literally side by side with him by the artist Ted Seth Jacobs. And Ted drew it to my specifications. And this is pretty much what I saw. And this ended up on the cover of Communion. Now, why that was, I didn't know at the time, but there was some other level of reality engaged here. Now that that image has become simply part of our lives, we're used to it now. It is a reference point in most human minds now, so that when they do show up, we're going to be able, if they do, and they look something like this, we're going to be able to deal with that much more easily than we would have been had this suddenly walked out of a dark closet into your bedroom in the middle of the night, as has happened to many people. Back in 1987, we began to get letters, a lot of letters, to the point where 3 postmen were coming every afternoon with 3 bags of mail and pouring them onto the floor in our living room. I couldn't imagine what we would do with these letters, because there were so many it seemed overwhelming. And she said, well, it's not overwhelming. I need a secretary. And she found a secretary, Laurie Barnes, who happened to live down the street from us, and she had sent us a letter about her own experiences. And Anne and Laurie opened letter after letter after letter for years, until they had opened and read a couple of 100,000 letters. A large number of those letters now are collected at Rice University in their Archives of the Impossible program, and they are now of interest to scholars, and thank goodness they were saved, because they give us a picture of what our visitors do, what it's like to be with them, how we feel and experience them, and therefore also a picture of what the relationship actually is. And you know what? You probably know about the abduction scenario. Some of you have probably had much richer and more complex experiences than that. Like me, I had the abduction scenario and then had a whole lifetime, a whole trajectory of life with them, where now it is a settled relationship that makes sense, that works, and has immeasurably enriched my life. But at first, it was terrible. It was an awful relationship. I was beaten up, raped, given a horribly hard time. I didn't know at the time something they probably did know, which is that in order to really initiate someone, to really overturn their life, you have to get through to them. And that's essentially what happened to me was about. They were getting through to me. Anne created this book, Communion Letters. It was totally ignored. These are 115 letters, and why it was ignored was this. The general audience couldn't understand it. They could not understand what these people were saying. The UFO community saw that most of the letters weren't about abductions, and therefore they just dismissed them as nonsense, because what they were doing in those days is someone would come in and say, I think I had a close encounter experience, and they would hypnotize them and hypnotize them and hypnotize them until finally it was an abduction. In other words, they weren't doing anything very useful. But Anne's attitude was, why do we need to hypnotize people? I can understand what happened with you, but none of these people are getting hypnotized, and look at what is actually happening. If there is such a thing as alien contact, this is it, because this is really so strange. This would be more of what it was actually like. And that's the record she left behind of these marvelous, marvelous letters. Science and the Academy touched this subject in those days at peril. In fact, that's still the case. I don't know if any of you were at the UFO panel this morning, but one thing that is changing is that the scientific community is gradually getting its head around the idea that UFOs might be real and might be a genuine unknown. They haven't gotten their heads around us yet, the close encounter witnesses. And that's going to take some doing, because when they do that, they have to face something. They have to face that they're not at the top of the intellectual food chain in this world, that somebody else is already there. Now, I knew an astronaut. I've known quite a few astronauts, most of whom were very interested in this material. One of them, Rusty Schweickart, just absolutely rejected it altogether. And I said, Rusty, the evidence is really compelling. And he said, yeah, but here's my problem. I don't want the path to Mars to be well worn. And boy, that hit me between the eyes, because we don't want to go down. If the universe is already completely known and the paths are all already made, what have we got? What do we have? What will come to us? And the answer is, what will come to us is our experience. That's what Rusty didn't understand. The path to Mars can't be well worn for us until we've trod on it. For us. This is us, about us. Anyway, Jeff Kripal came along. Jeff is a professor of religion at Rice University in Texas. And he took an interest in my experiences. And thank goodness he did, because at the time I was totally out in the cold. And Jeff decided, why don't we write a book together? And we, oh, wait a minute, have I gone off my... No. Oh, as always. Yeah, okay. Why don't we write a book together? And we did. And what this book is I describe an experience, and then Jeff, from his viewpoint as an academic, not as a scientist, as an academic and not as necessarily a believer in the close encounter experience, reacts to it in terms of its significance as mythology and as a religious experience or initiatory experience. It's a very, very interesting way to do it. And the book was helpful in that it took the experience out of our kind of UFO ghetto that we're all in and brought it to a wider audience. And people began to think about it in a new way, because the extraordinary irony is this experience is just dismissed by the general public and by the scientific community and by the academic community, and yet it's the most important experience in human history. It may be something that's been going on forever, but what's important is we're noticing it now. We're noticing it. We're waking up in the middle of the night, and instead of thinking I had a weird dream, we're realizing somebody was there. Somebody was there. 2 summers ago, I had another experience. In 2015, my wife Annie passed away, and she was a truly remarkable human being. First of all, I'll give you an idea of how remarkable she was. In 1986, when I was just pulling this whole thing together, I thought I was going nuts. I thought I was a psychotic, and I was trying to drive her away, because if I'd ended up institutionalized, hopelessly lost in this strange experience, what I was feared would happen, she wouldn't be able to divorce me, and she'd have a little boy to raise on her own without a husband. And so I was trying to get her to divorce me, and we were fighting, and it was a horrible time in our life, early 1986 after this happened. And then I finally realized that it had happened, that it wasn't insanity, that it was real. And I told a close friend of mine, Timothy Greenfield Saunders, a photographer in New York, the experience, and I said, how am I going to tell Ann? Because I'm telling you that I was taken aboard a flying saucer by little men. And he said, oh, she'll handle it, just tell her. And so I sat down with her, and I said, Annie, I've got something I've got to tell you. And she was tearing up because she was afraid that I was going to say, we need to split up. And I told her the story, and she looked at me, and I thought, now she's going to be the one who wants the divorce. And she said, oh, thank God, I thought you were going crazy. Which told me, boy, did you get the right wife, fella. And from that moment on, Ann took this in hand. I was going to call the book Body Terror, the first book, because it was so visceral and physical. The terror was so unbelievably physical. And she said, Whitley, that's not what it's about. That's only a little bitty piece of it. The book is about something more than contact. It's about communion. Call the book Communion. And that probably was the single greatest insight either of us ever had, except for one more, which Annie also had. And it gets to the letters that I have, that she was collecting. About 3 years later, we probably had about 40 or 50,000 letters read at that point. And she came out of her office one day and she said a very interesting thing. She said, Whitley, this has something to do with what we call death. You notice she said, what we call death, not death, but what we call death. Because by that time, she had already realized that it was something very different. And she had been getting people to come to the cabin to meet the visitors. And in my books, Transformation, Breakthrough, and A New World, a lot of those people are declared witnesses with names. I mean, this is probably the most witnessed paranormal experience in the world, in history. So give you an example of what happens. I got to move around. I'm not a good stander. An idea of what happened. Laurie Barnes, the secretary, was at the cabin with Raven Dana, another lady who's declared her experiences at the cabin many times, a film crew, and a number of other people. And Laurie came, took a walk. The cabin, the situation in the cabin is, it's an isolated little cabin in a group of about 10 other cabins, all of them on about 1 acre to 3 acres of land. It has a dirt road in front of it, and there's, beyond the cabins, there's 15,000 acres of woods. So she comes in from the road, and she says, "I just saw my brother on the road." And we're amazed. Oh, is he coming down? No, you don't understand. My brother disappeared 20 years ago. He was declared dead by the FBI. And I asked him to come down and meet my friends. And he just smiled and said, "I just wanted to tell you that I'm all right." And then he glided back into the woods and disappeared. And he took me aside and said, "The visitors will be here tonight." And they were. They came to, first to the film crew. It's a man and wife. We had a low-light camera on in the house. They came to the film crew, to the man and wife. The husband wakes up and sees this little man standing beside the bed with a huge head. And this was a Hollywood professional. He was not into this. He was making a documentary about the movie Communion that was in progress then. And so he's pretty astonished, whereupon an interesting thing happens. When he feels fear, the creature beside the bed, the rollaway, the convertible couch, suddenly ends up with the head of a hawk and scares the hell out of him, of course. Then it disappears completely. But what happened was this. Two things at the same time. One, it was the beginning of a very profound and incredible communication. Two, it was reacting the same way a blowfish reacts when it's frightened. A blowfish is a little fish, and it'll blow up and look like something really dangerous when it feels threatened. And that's what happened there. So we're looking at someone with a natural adaptation to threat that's like things that are on this earth, but not like human beings. The next thing you knew, it was waking up Raven Dana in the guest room next door, tapping her on the shoulder. And there was an eye of Horus hanging in the room and looking down on her. And it said to her in her head, "What can I do for you?" And she said immediately, physically, as soon as she realized what was going on, what she was dealing with, "You could walk down that hall." The hall outside had the low-light camera on it. So it disappears. Then it goes into the next room and confronts Laurie Barnes and another woman who was there, who doesn't wish her name to be used. And we looked and looked and looked at the video from the low-light camera. Nothing was on the video, frustratingly. I've had so many cameras and videos. My house is so loaded with security equipment and video equipment now. So far, I've gotten essentially nothing from the visitors, at least. It's been very frustrating. And I can explain, and well, if you wish me to, why it is that they're so secretive. But they are. In any case, the next thing that happens is my son and I are sleeping out in the woods because his bedroom is occupied by Laurie Barnes and the other bedroom is occupied by Raven Dana, and he's 10 years old, and there's no way I'm letting him camp out with friends or alone, not in those woods. So we're coming up it's just before dawn, we're coming up from the woods to go into the house and get breakfast. And we see coming out of the front door a figure, short figure in a sort of hood. sort of translucent. It comes down to the end of the front walks across the deck in front of our eyes, and then goes off into the woods, moving very quickly. And here's the thing that's interesting. It didn't move through the trees like a ghost would. It shot around the trees at breakneck speed, meaning it was a solid thing. It was something real, something physical, and we must never forget that. This has something to do with the physical world in the end. It's not all supernatural and in consciousness, etc., and so forth. In the end, there are entities, beings, and eventually we're going to end up living with them in our world and in other worlds, if we survive. Now, one of the things that is most mysterious about all of this is the fact that they're so secretive. I mean, I live with them. They're integrated into my life now in ways that are very profound. But I can't get video of them. I can't get it. When they come into the house that I have now up the road in Santa Monica, the camera systems go off. They turn off. That's how I know they were there. I often can sense their presence but not see them, or sometimes I can see them, but only very briefly. Now, why would that be? Why would it be that it's so secretive? Why, I always say, people say, well, the government's keeping all these secrets. I say, who cares what the government is or isn't doing? That's not the point. The point is, the visitors are keeping these secrets. They could change everything in 5 minutes, but they don't. They hide. I've worked and worked trying to understand the reason for that, because it seems very counterproductive. I've thought to myself, given their messages about the dangers of nuclear weapons and the dangers of environmental stress, those are the two things that they have communicated in the first case by going to nuclear sites. And if you were at Linda's presentation last night, she talked about Dr. Salas and his report on what he saw as a young man at a nuclear missile site. And there are many such reports, quite well documented reports. There is a concern among our visitors about nuclear weapons. There's no question about that. The other thing is that among the close encounter witnesses, there are many, many stories that say they're warning us about our environment in various ways. And if you look around you, obviously, those warnings are also serious. So there's a bottom line there. They want us to survive. So why don't they just come out and say it? That has been my question. Why don't you come out and say it? Spend 5 minutes on planet Earth and give us this message. We will all hear it. I haven't gotten an answer to that question, but I think I have figured it out. One of the things that happened in history in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries was something called cultural colonization. As the Europeans, with their superior technology, went around the world, culture after culture took a look at these ships, these beautiful big guns, and these wonderful tools and implements that the Europeans had, and they thought to themselves, the hell with our baskets and our stone knives and our gods who didn't tell us about any of this stuff. I want a steel knife. I want a toaster. In other words, and their cultures disappeared and are just now in various parts of the world. Attempts are being made by wise people who were in those cultures to rebuild them after this shock. Our visitors apparently are very aware of this and do not wish our culture to be damaged by that shock. And they must be between a rock and a hard place, because the farther we go down the road and the more danger we end up in, the more our survival is threatened and the more compulsion they have to come out. But if they come out too early, then there's going to be this cultural colonization. And they're not going to want that. That's what people like me are about. It's what the disclosures that are taking place in the government are about. We're out here saying, hey, this is real. Let's get used to it. And once we are used to it, then I think that we will have a much easier time with them coming into our world. But there are going to be some major differences and major changes, because there's one thing that the scientists, the academics, the general population, the government, the media, all don't get. It's the soul. This is the central issue for the visitors. This is what matters to them. We have gone soul blind. Our civilization became so materialistic that okay, let me back up. Okay, so materialistic as we industrialized that we have literally lost contact with who we really are. Now, because of that, we see this as entirely a physical experience. We see the visitor experience. You don't, I don't think. But most people see it as basically a physical experience. We're waiting for the aliens to land. Now, that's liable to happen eventually. But in fact, this is about the soul. This is what they're here for. They have, and I have witnessed and experienced it, what I would describe as profound and sacred or very profane technologies that do affect the soul. They have taken me out of my body a number of times. In fact, one time that they took me out of my body, I ended up in Linda Molinow's house, and she woke up and found me hanging in a plant in her bedroom, and she was absolutely horrified and furious. She didn't know how that had been done. And I had to tell her, neither, Linda, I don't either. And I said I could see you. I could see a woman, and her eyes were open, and I couldn't tell who it was, but it looked familiar. And she said, well, it was me. And then another time, a man who is working in a very difficult area within the government, was at his wit's end because of the conflict he was experiencing between his feeling that this should be public knowledge and his constraints because of the national security issues and the secrecy agreements he had signed. And we were at a conference together, and this happened to me. I do a meditation at 11 o'clock at night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then at 1 o'clock in the afternoon every day in communication with the visitors. And the 3 a.m. meditation is the most profound and the most difficult, too, because they will wake me up if I don't do it. And they wake me up in all kinds of creative ways. In any case, this night I was in this little sort of dormitory. It was single rooms, and I'd flown and driven all day, and then spent the evening at the plenary session of the conference, and I was pretty tired. I got myself up to do the 3 a.m. They hit me on the shoulder to do the 3 a.m. meditation. I did it, and I went back to bed. And a little while later, bang, a shock went down my spine. And I thought, oh, God, don't you ever quit? It's now I've already done the meditation. But I got up again, and I found myself out in the hall, and I thought, holy moly, I've somehow walked out of my room. And, the door was locked. It had a spring lock. So you could open it from the inside, but if you closed it on the outside, then it was locked on the outside. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm in the hall of this stupid dormitory at 4 o'clock in the morning. How am I going to get back into my room? What a moron. Why did you do this? And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm not walking, I'm gliding. I thought, of course, they've taken me out of my body. I know that shock. I've had it before. And it's important to understand this because I'm leading somewhere with this. The shock down the spine opens these places that we call chakras. And when they're opened, the second body, not the soul, the second body can come out. And that is what had happened. They had a mission for me out of my body. And so now I realize I'm out of my body. My first thought is, Jeff Kripal, my dear friend and the co-author, was in one of the rooms across the hall. I want to show Jeff this because I know that there's a certain way of paying attention to your sensation that will make you visible if you're not in your body. I've done that before. So I wanted to go in his room and make myself visible to him so that he could have some verification, because this guy's way out on a limb. He believes me, but I would love him to have had this. I go into the room, and it turns out that Jeff not only sleeps like a log, but looks like a log when he is sleeping, which I found out. I couldn't wake him up, because one thing you can't do, you're not going to tap anybody on the shoulder. One of the first things my wife said to me after we regained contact, after she passed away, is, it looks like you're all intentionally ignoring us. And so, so I went through the wall into the next room where there was actually a lady who was a very, very advanced scientist. She was asleep too. Then I thought, well, there's one more person, and I went to that room. And there was the guy that I was just mentioning a moment ago, lying on his side with his eyes open. He sees me. And there's a communication. It's about his soul. I don't remember it, but it was profoundly moving to him. It changed his whole life, in fact. He became deeply religious after that, in his own way. In other words, they're never going to say, well, you need to become a Buddhist, or you need to become a Muslim, or you need to become a Catholic. But they're going to point out the importance of having a relationship with higher energies and what is sacred in this universe. And your way of doing that is your business, because there are many, many, many paths. So he got that, and then I found myself going out through the ceiling. And I went way up in the sky. It was at the one point, it was, on the one hand, it was marvelous. On the other hand, it was extremely scary because I went up so high that I could see the line of dawn somewhere in the middle of the United States. I was way out on the West Coast, and the ocean, the Pacific Ocean below me, and the town, and I could see the curve of the earth. It was a remarkable experience. And it was scary because, I knew I wasn't in my body, but can a soul fall? I seem to remember something about that in the Bible. In any case, the next thing I know, I'm shooting down into the dawn, and I end up on what is clearly a college campus, but I don't know which one. I've never seen it before. I move around some of the roads. I see a person walking down Sunday morning at 7 o'clock or so at the college campus. I see a person walking along the road, and I try to make myself visible to them. They walk right through me, don't even see me. So then I go into a building, and it turns out to be a dormitory. And I see down a hallway, I go into a room through the wall, and there's a guy sleeping in there. He doesn't wake up, and I can't wake him up. Then I see something that looked like a gigantic dulcimer about this long with a curved top leaning against the wall in the room. And at the doorway. And then I go out into the quad near the building, and I think to myself, I don't know how far am I away from Petaluma, California, but I'm not in my body. And what is my body okay? Because I don't want to die like this. I'm not sure can I not get in again? So I end up going back up in the air, and it's all automatic at this point, and I shoot across, and I'm back in my body in a matter of seconds. And I think to myself, I wonder if this guy is going to say anything about what he saw. So I go into breakfast about an hour later, and there's a total riot going on. Not only did he see it, he's texted everybody about what he saw. And about the fact that Whitley came into my room out of his body in the middle of the night and then went up through the ceiling. I thought, wow, so that worked. All of these scientists who are living in this materialistic world are getting a message from the visitors. Do you see where I'm going? This message is terribly important. We have souls. They can be manipulated and used. There is technology and science. There is a science of the soul. And you know where we need to go to find out? The last document of soul science that was left on planet Earth is also the oldest religious document we have. It is the pyramid text in the Pyramid of Unas in Egypt. This is I think it's 5,400 years old. It is an incredibly sophisticated piece of hieroglyphics. I actually, in order to understand it better, I learned some hieroglyphics. It's very difficult to learn. And I used a book called The Dawning Moon of the Mind by Susan Brind-Morrow, who is a brilliant Egyptologist and one of the greatest translators of hieroglyphics in the world. There have been a lot of very bad translators of hieroglyphics because they come from a Eurocentric viewpoint that we are the top of the intellectual food chain. We are the best. We know the most. And these ancient Egyptians, thousands of years ago, they didn't know nothing, right? Well, they knew a lot more than we do. A lot more. Because wherever they came from, whether we are in a fallen civilization, or we lost the thread, or they had something that we don't have. In the Pyramid of Unas, it talks about the spine as being a column of light and a serpent of light. And around that serpent of light are 7 smaller serpents circling it and drawing energy from the body into the spine, that is to say, drawing the experience that we're all having all the time into the spine and accelerating it into light so that it is then gathered in the second body. That's the body I was just talking about that was out. And upon death, that body will move into the soul and be another life that soul has lived. I have seen things that show me how this all works and how incredibly beautiful it actually is. But the important thing is this. The visitors, they are interested, very interested in this process. They're interested in souls, and not all of them necessarily have good motives. I don't know if they do or don't. But I do know that some of them want strong souls because of the aesthetics. They're beautiful. There's something very beautiful about a strong soul. I've been face to face with naked souls that were beautiful. And I'll tell you what that's like. Back in the mid-90s, when we still had our cabin, we lost it because I was so badly treated, basically, in the media and made such a laughingstock. People stopped buying my books, and I lost all my money, and we lost the cabin. But before that happened, one night, there were 7 thuds on the roof of the room where I meditated. I've been meditating for a long time, since 1969, when I started meditating. And invisible entities came down into, they'd made themselves known very forcibly. Then they came down into the room and I couldn't see them. And I finally said, look, I'm trying, but I can't meditate in here with invisible people. It's not possible. I can't concentrate. So I went to bed, and in the middle of the night, one of them showed himself, and he did this even though he was not physical. He had a high level of attention, and he was able to concentrate to the point that he could make himself appear in a physical form that he had had when he was physically alive. These were human beings in the between lives state. And once he did that, I was able to meditate with them even without seeing them. But then came the day when we lost the cabin. And it was the last night. They came to the room as always. And I said, this is it. You will never see me in this room again. Never again. And there was a sort of uncomfortable feeling, and that was all. And then I said, I know I have never seen you as you really are. Because I'd seen what he was when he was physically alive, but I knew I had never seen what he is now. And I said, if there's anything left for me here, let me see you as you really are. Nothing happened. I went to bed. I was not even 5 minutes later, I noticed a glow in front of the meditation room. And the way the house was built, the bedroom had windows here, and then there was a hallway, and then there were windows of the meditation room that looked out over the garden, and then the bedroom windows looked out over the driveway. So the glow was coming from over the garden. And I thought, what could it be? And I got up and I looked out the window like this, and there floated into my view what I can only describe as a star, a beautiful little star about the size maybe of a basketball, but incredibly, brilliantly bright light with laser-like rays coming off of it. And when the rays touched me, there was a little pricking feeling, and I could literally taste the essence of this other person. This light was this man. And hanging in the light were these little golden diadems almost. And I knew from some kind of deep instinct that we probably all possess that these were his lives. This was a human being who was realized, fulfilled, and this light was the light of man. It's a light that we all aspire to. And the aim of our visitors, the good ones, the ones who want us to prosper and thrive, is to bring us all into that state. Now, however, is the Air Force and the scientific community going to figure that out? The answer is they probably aren't, but you are. You have the chance. You do have the chance. Now, this is not all sweetness and light speaking. Before we go on, a dear friend, John Yost, who just, I think apparently released a documentary that has me in it called Abduction. I can't tell you details because I don't know them yet, but he made the documentary, and I think it's just been released in the past couple of days. I wish I could tell you more about it, but I can't. But I was with a friend, Mark Sims, who lives up in Ojai, California, and he happened to show me a little figurine that he had in his possession. It's very ancient. It's at least 4,000 or 5,000 years old, and another similar object that was found in the same trove in Mexico there were some bits of material, wax of some kind, in cracks in it, and that wax was removed and carbon dated to 14,000 years old. But the problem is we don't know exactly what the waxy substance is and whether it got there when the figure was being made or was something put on it later or where it came from. So we only know this. We know the figures are very old. That aspect of it is authentic. They're not recent. And in any case, this one that you're going to see in a second can't be recent because nobody knows this anymore. We've lost the soul science that was in the Pyramid of Unas. Lost it completely. That science is really very simple, and you're going to see it illustrated here in this very ancient figure. The body, the second body, and the soul must work together in harmony to bring the impressions of life across the barrier from the physical and into the soul. And when you die and your second body melds again with your soul, everything in your life becomes part of that soul. Forever. Forever. This is why the Egyptians had the 42 laws of Ma'at, a long list of instructions as to how to live a good life. It's why the Ten Commandments exist. It's why I wrote a book called Jesus, A New Vision, that is a reinterpretation of the life of Jesus in the context of how to live a life that builds a strong soul. Okay, they knew a lot about this all over the world once. Now we're going to go to this next piece. This takes about 5 minutes. There's no sound. Is the guy here? Let me try. They promised me that the sound would work. Well, oh, I'm so sorry. You know, I really wish that they had been a little bit more careful here. I was so counting on showing you this, and now apparently I can't do it. No sound. There's no sound at all. My thing always works perfectly. I don't understand why there'd be no sound. Okay, I don't want to worry about it. I will tell them the story as we go along. Okay. You want to run it? Here, it's going. Oh.
Give me 1 second.
Sure. That's my grandson in there. give them another moment. Sorry about this.
Tell us about your internet show, your radio show.
What?
Tell us about your show.
Oh, yeah. I have a podcast called Dreamland, which has been going since 1998, if you can believe it. I haven't missed a week. And Dreamland is, you can find it on unknowncountry.com or on YouTube at user W. Strieber, and on Apple Podcasts and it's on Alexa, I think. Lots of places. You just go ask Alexa Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. I'm too paranoid personally to use Alexa, but I know it's there. In any case, the show is a mix of deep spiritual exploration and exploration of the visitor experience and UFO experience and so on and so things like that. Like week before this, we had Lee McCloskey, who is a visionary artist and an alchemist of the first order, a very knowledgeable man. And then this week we had the radar operator who had been the radar operator on the ship that first observed the Tic Tacs. And like many military people who get involved with the visitors get involved with them. I always tell these people that work on the materials, if you're looking at the materials, believe me, the materials are looking back at you. And they have that experience because he found himself involved in the close encounter experience after he made those radar images and realized what was going on. So that's the sort of people we have on the show, and it's a wonderful show. It's been going for, as I say, for many, many years. And I'm primarily interested in the serious close encounter community, so I'm not trying to get a huge public audience because there's not a lot there for them. The show is for people who want the close encounter experience, having it, had it, or take an intense interest in it, because quite often, if you have an interest in it, it's because it happened to you and you don't remember it. So that's who the show is for. And it's not, and the website, it's not political. The website and the show are not political at all. And I say that only because this is a very intense political time in our life, in our world, and we're not in that space on our show and in our website. Yeah? You want me to go back up to it? Wait, sorry. You want to pull out of the edit mode? Here. Okay, let's try this again.
Is owned by Mark Sims, a dear friend who's also been activated by
Thank you
remarkable experience.
very much, guys.
We don't know its age, but it's a very valuable little figure. It cradles in its arms this man, a human being. Is this a soul carrying a man who through time ages upward into a higher quality outside of time? If so, there's a lesson here, because in this little part there is a triangle, and if you put this triangle in this and put it down on a soft surface, it will balance. But without the triangle, it won't balance. It will always fall. What is the triangle? Well, let's look at this in terms of an ancient law, the law of three, or the law of Trinity. It's a very old law. It's also a very new law in the sense that it is the structure of the atom. The electron is the passive force in an atom. The proton, the active force. The neutron, the balancing force. The neutron is the little triangle. In the human being, the body is the passive force. The emotions are the active force. And the mind is the force that balances the two. And you keep the flow of life coming in a healthy way. Now, what is this between the body and the soul? This little triangle is something truly huge. Let's go all the way from the atom back to the original idea of the Sphinx. The Sphinx contains three beasts: the bull, the lion, and the man. The bull is strength. It's the passive part of the Sphinx. The lion is courage. It's the active part of the Sphinx. The man is the intelligence of the Sphinx that balances the courage and the strength. When all three are balanced together, the Sphinx's wings spread and the Sphinx rises above life. That is to say, you cease to be identified with the things of life. The politics, the flow of this, how much money do I have, am I sick or well, any of that stuff. You become objective about life and you see life in a state of balance. The little triangle is that state of balance between the body moving through time and the soul gazing upward toward ascension. It's a remarkable and beautiful piece. And whether it was made 6 months ago or 10,000 years ago doesn't really matter. It's a masterpiece.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So, as I spoke of earlier, we have the body, the second body, and the soul. The body is drawing life in. The second body is collecting it, accelerating it into another level, and making it ready for the soul. That's what we're here for. That's what we're doing here. All of us, every single one of us does this. There is no such thing as someone who is more important in this or less important than another person. We're all equal in this, all souls, all of us. And the life of the man in the great house or the palace or the place of power and the life of the little man shining shoes on the street corner, they're all the same because of the fact that you can gain as much beauty out of a small life and feed your soul as richly as you can out of a large life, and in many cases, much more richly. Our entire Western intellectual establishment has abandoned the idea of the soul and calls it a superstition. Our supermaterial culture has put most of us, including in this room, including you and me and all of us, in a state of soul anesthesia. We can't perceive our own souls. We can't feel them. We don't know what their health is. I have a dear friend who had a very dark experience of feeling that her soul had somehow disappeared, that it had left her. And she's subsequently gone on a journey of enriching her experience and her relationship with her soul. And it doesn't feel at all like it's left her now. It feels like it was giving her a warning that please don't leave me. The soul will never leave you, but you may leave your soul. I think we do that all too often. But because we can't perceive our souls, we also can't perceive the dead. When the body dies, the personality, George or Whitley or whoever, Mary, dies with it. And that's why we fear death. That personality, all that it contained is in the second body now and will go into the soul. So nothing is really lost but the physical body. And the physical body returns to the earth which created it in the first place. Now, in all of this, the visitors are very, very involved. They are going to be engaging with us primarily on a soul level. And this is why so much close encounter experience and so much contact looks so strange, especially to the military and the Air Force and people like that. They don't know what they are dealing with. They have no idea because they're soul blind. And if you're soul blind, you can't communicate with somebody who's trying to talk to your soul. It's not going to make any sense. And they're shooting at them. They've been shooting at them for years. For years. I don't know if you heard the other day, was it yesterday? Yeah, gosh, it seems like I've been here longer than 2 days. But someone was saying about how there has been a request to try to capture a UFO. That's like trying to capture spindrift from the top of a wave. It just isn't going to happen. Yeah, they may capture the physical object, but they will not capture the soul to which it belonged. Because the visitors have done, when you're near a UFO, when you're actually doing this, and you're going to go be with them, you feel the presence of a person. It's like there is someone there, like the machine has a conscious life in it. And that's because it does. It's been inhabited by one of their souls, which is controlling it in the same exact way that we control our own bodies. Only the difference is this soul can leave it and go back into its body whenever it prefers to. It's a very, very high level of technology that we can't even conceive of yet. And I want to read you now, we've got 15 minutes left, a letter. Well, instead of doing this, I think, I'll read the letter and then I'll talk a little bit about it. This is one of the letters that Anne collected. And there's, as I say, there's all kinds of them at Rice University. And they are incredibly rich with material, these letters. Because if you look past, that's not an abduction experience, that's bullshit. That's not an abduction experience, forget it. If you look in a different way, that this is somebody trying to say something about what happened to them as best they can, then you begin to know there is communication going on here at a very extraordinary level. Okay, here's just one of these letters, and now I'll talk about it. I have episodes of having had an abundance of electricity in my body. Anyone else have a lot of electricity? Yeah, there's a few people. I've had hair dryers, clocks, watches, TVs, etc. malfunction or break down during these times. My husband can detect these episodes at times, and when I'm unaware of them, there's a humming feeling, a buzzing that stems from within my body and is detectable as a sort of force field around me. If he puts his hand 2 to 3 inches away from my skin, the hairs on my body stand on end. I sense the humming and he feels extreme static discharge. We've mentioned this to many doctors and have never been able to get an answer. Well, I'm not too surprised about that. Some events include my grandmother, brother, and husband, and this is going to be characteristic of this. As we wake up more and more to this, more and more people are going to realize, hey, it's not just me. It's my brother, my husband, my grandparents. It's us. We are the ones having contact as a species. And it goes back a long time. We're just beginning to notice it now. Some events include my grandmother, brother, and husband. I'm 39 and look back on these events with the knowledge that they dealt with something outside of our world, perhaps a hallucinatory experience or mental abnormalities. But if that's true, why do seemingly normal people report such detailed and similar experiences? How many of us have dismissed these patterns as daydreaming or imagination? How many of us fail to notice that we are hyperdimensional beings living in these thick bodies? So for the time we are moving through the physical world, we can only see what's coming into us through the time stream. But that's what we chose. That's why we're here. There's no doubt in my mind that I've experienced visits as you describe in your book. That was the reason my husband bought it for me, because I felt disturbed and isolated about this and needed to know that someone had experienced them too. What is happening? During one of these episodes, I recalled the words, "It is the me within thee." Could that mean we are a part of them, that they are a part of us, and we are one in the same? I'm quite sincere, and I believe with all my heart the validity of my experiences. The validity of my experiences. She wants validity, validation. We've gotten a start on that, actually, all of us close encounter witnesses. When we saw the communion face, we knew. It wasn't my dream. That happened. Now, the government has finally admitted that UFOs are a genuine unknown, so we know someone is here. But we know more. We know that this is not about our bodies and their bodies and aliens coming here. It is one of the things the visitors say that is so valuable and so important is this: there is only one human species in the universe. It's all of us, and there are many races. We are one of those races, but one of millions of races who all have that same structure that you saw in that little statuette. The body, the soul, and the consciousness between them balancing, and that triad between them balancing. Did you notice the soul had those big eyes like the visitors? That's because that's who we are. They're not coming here as aliens. They're coming here as us and trying to wake us up so that we will remember who we also are. Who we also are. And regain our lost place in this universe, because we did lose it. If we didn't lose it, then who made that figure? Who built the Sphinx? Who created the Pyramid of Unas? Those were done by human beings who knew the truth about what a human being really is. It's time to regain that truth. And the visitors are here trying to help us do just that. And I think I'm going to now open the floor to a couple of questions. So, yeah. I'll repeat the question if you can't hear it. So.
You told us that you kind of know why are they being so secretive about like their experiences. So what is your conclusion of those today?
Can you why they're being? Yeah, take off the mask and say it again.
So you were telling that you kind of know why are being so secretive about like the hearing like on TV and stuff like.
Okay, I thought I had explained that. Let me explain it a little further. This is what I think, not what I know. This is not a belief. It's I hope, a good question. I believe that they hold back for this. I'll answer the question a little differently from the way I discussed it earlier. They, as I perceive them, are outside of time looking in. We are inside time, in the stream of time. We are like, the body is like bait, it's experience bait dropped into the stream of time to have experiences by the soul, which is outside of time. But if we, the body, is pulled outside of time, suddenly we know the future. We know everything. We know the past. We have no ability to make choices. We have no ability to be surprised. You and I, every second of our life, every instance, is always a surprise. We may know a little bit about the future, but not much. The visitors took me out into this other state once for a few seconds, about 40 seconds. I was outside of time in my body, and it was like being a robot. It was horrendous. Then I'm back in my body again, and suddenly I was where I belong. They took the little fish of Whitley out of the water and held him out of the water for a second so he could see what it was like, and then put him back in again. The water is the stream of time, and all that comes to us in that stream is gathered in the second body to be delivered to the soul as a kind of food, a beautiful food of life. And the danger is, if they come near us, they bring with them their presence outside of time. I'll give you an example of what I mean. I often go to conferences at a place called the Esalen Institute in Northern California. And I was at a conference there with Jeff Kripal, my co-author on Supernatural. And Jeff, people want to stay in the room with me because they get experiences. The visitors will show up and they'll have a secondary experience. So Jeff was in the room, and one of them showed up, poked me on the shoulder to wake me up for the 3 o'clock meditation. I'm always so happy to wake up in the middle of the night and do that. And it encountered Jeff also. Now, I'm used to this. I've been waked up so many times. I've had them around me all of my life. And I'm quite comfortable being with them without accidentally slipping out of the time stream. That's not going to happen. So I'm not scared of it. Jeff was not used to it. It had never happened to him before. And what happened to him was this. His perception was there was a tremendous crashing sound, like glass falling, like, as he put it, the whole world was collapsing. And then he said, from within my body, somewhere else within my body, my own voice cry out, "Oh my God!" And that was because he had come to the edge of the time stream, and he was recognized a danger that is literally scarier than death. It is being removed from time while you're still in your body. You're dead and alive at the same time. That's what it's about. And that's why they hide. And we're in a situation where they're going to have to figure out some way of saving our asses from us, because we are in trouble here. And they want these bodies or they wouldn't be here. They want us to go on or they would not be here. Yes, sir?
Thanks. Related to what you just said, playing devil's advocate, they want us to go forward, but sometimes I'm wondering if they want the earth to go forward. They want the environment to go forward.
Without us?
Maybe they're indifferent. I don't know.
If they were indifferent, they would not be warning us about anything. They are warning us. I'll give you an example of my own life. One of the things that I report, I believe in communion or transformation, is seeing the earth on fire. And now it is. There's fires all over the planet. Not just in California, but in Siberia, in Africa, huge, massive fires all the time now. The earth is on fire. So that was a warning. It was a warning about this time. I don't think they would have any reason to warn us. In fact, they would do the opposite. They'd be saying, you're doing just fine. It's all wonderful. You're doing great. Don't worry about a thing. But what they wouldn't be saying then is, we don't want you here, and when you're gone, we're going to take the planet. That's obviously not the plan. So, okay, we have room for one more. Yes, sir.
Do you have any personal opinion or this gives you the indication of how and when this because in the distant past it seems like there was open communion between them and us.
Yes.
Where and how,
Will it recur?
why did that disconnect?
Well, it's a good question as to why that disconnect happened. I actually can't be sure. I don't know. There was obviously a tremendous upheaval on this planet 12,000 years ago. That's what we don't know. I mean, that was when the mammoths and the giant ground sloths and the American horse and camel all went extinct, and when the great flood myths started and the human species was really knocked for a loop, and the whole planetary environment was tremendously challenged. But was that a natural thing or something else? One of the strangest letters we ever got was from a woman who was walking in the woods with her son, and suddenly a little blue dwarf came out of a cave beside the trail and said that he was a rebel and he was going to tell her the truth. And the truth was that there had been long ago a war between Earth and Mars, and we had destroyed Mars, but they had captured our souls. And their name for our planet is dead forever because they have condemned us to recycle endlessly in bodies on this planet. Now, that can't be true. It may be that there are some who would like us to recycle in bodies on this planet forever, but not everyone, or I wouldn't be here. They would not have spent my entire life showing me how to ascend and teaching my wife the same and giving me the extraordinary grace of watching her ascend out of this world after she died, which I saw with my own eyes. So there may be many different forces here, many different motives here. I mean, it's a huge universe. It'd be amazing if only one motive applied to planet Earth. Think of what would happen if we went to another planet. If it was easy for us to go, if you could go to another world as easily as stepping out into your driveway, and the only restriction was you must not let them know you're there. What all sorts of things would we get up to on that planet? Goodness only knows. We'd be mining the planet. We'd be doing things to them. We'd be playing with their biology, with their DNA. It'd be a wild, wild situation. And it is here. So I would say that there are probably others with other motives, and there may be some with very negative motives. I mean, after all, Linda talks about the cattle mutilations, and I always think to myself, A, they're incredibly creepy. B, what's the big deal? Because we kill more cattle in a week on this planet than all the mutilations put together, ever that have been found. And could it be that they're simply using the same food animal we do, but that it's creepy because of the way they do it? No. So I think that the best answer to that question is there's going to be a lot of different approaches to us. Some of them aren't going to be things we like. Some of them are. And it's up to us. One of the things I found was that the more I worked toward understanding what the good is and making that my life, that my soul, trying to do everything I could to enrich my soul and to think hard about the way I live. Have I done something well or badly? Have I hurt somebody or helped them? The more my relationship with the visitors improved. It got better and better and better. And maybe I was simply handed off from the bad guys who wanted nothing further to do with this creep to the good guys who welcomed this little soul trying to make something of itself. I don't know. Yeah, one last question, sir.
Would have visitors ever engaged you when you were writing your various books, including the one that you're working on right now, with ideas like we want you to talk about this or that, or
No.
any sense of
Oh, there's lots of engagement, but no suggestions. In other words, it's not, we want you to talk about this. It's, I am led to discoveries of things that are really, to me, cool and belong in the book. That's how it works. And I don't have time now, but I could go, and I use this implant that was placed in my ear in 1989. It's turned out to be a very valuable research tool, and I use it all the time in my work. And it doesn't tell me things. It's not a mind control device. Among other things, it's a master of synchronicity. It will, if I think about something I need in research, and I wonder, what about this? Presto, a day later, something falls into my hands. It's the perfect thing that I need every time. Just happened today, in fact. I needed something about the scientific community's changing relationship with reality. And this week's magazine, New Scientist, the prominent British science magazine's lead article is about the idea that we may ourselves literally be changing, making reality as we move along. And they may have figured out the mechanism of that, how that works. And that's going to be really interesting if we discover that that's true, because we will turn out, we will not be alone in this process of making reality. One of the letters said, the lady said, or the man rather said, that he had heard a voice say, "Let us begin." And that's how I want to end today. Let us begin. Thank you.